In Russia, on the ground there, is a voice that's important, and we need to hear it.
As political repression descends upon Europe, both on the right and the left, one of the most dangerous phrases to say now is peace in Europe. If you're a journalist, politician, or academic, and you argue for good relations between Europe and Russia, they will go for you. Such is the mass hysteria that has descended. Do what I'm doing now, standing in front of the Kremlin, making such a case, and it's akin to heresy. But since we can't use Ukrainian lives to overthrow the Russian government, since the war is failing, we should be pursuing good relations with Russia in order to trade, in order to fuel our economies. It's not a very radical idea, but our leaders are still stuck in the orthodoxies of the old world, and a new world has arrived. We shouldn't be sending tanks and troops to Ukraine. We should be sending diplomats and business leaders to Moscow.
Johnny Miller, welcome to Deep Dive. How are you?
I'm good. I'm taking it a bit easy at the moment, so I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. You're taking it easy. Yeah, you've been living quite a life the last few years. Would you, since the first time we're even meeting you, first time I'm meeting you, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing the last few years.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've covered conflicts around the world in Syria, Libya, Africa, Asia, and I promised myself no more war zones, to be honest. But when the war in Ukraine started, I went originally to the Ukrainian side, to Kyiv, but I left there after just a few days because I knew I'm very clear about my angle. Every journalist has an angle. Like many people, top American academics, Jeffrey Sachs, John Mearsheimer, many others, both on the right and the left politically, knew how this war would end, that ultimately Russia would prevail, and that European interests would be damaged. So it's not safe to be a journalist, pursue those angles. I'm very critical of the Ukrainian government as well. I've been deported from other countries, so I know how quickly the net flows. So I left Ukraine, and then I applied to the Russian side. Essentially, I've been here ever since most of the war. I was for over a year on and off Donbass in Crimea, and now I'm in Moscow. I recently just been granted political asylum in Russia because I fear arrest if I go back to the UK because of my reporting in Donbass. And my reporting is very honest, very accurate, but I'm one of the few, I think, particularly European. In America, you've got a big sort of Republican movement. Many journalists, people like yourselves, who are very critical of the NATO position. But in Europe, particularly Britain, there's very little criticism of the NATO European position. If you stand up against that, then you get persecuted. I mean, look at Scott Ritter. I'm sure you're aware of him. He said his passport taken in America, but in Europe, I think it's even worse persecution. So now I'm just in Moscow, trying to get back to doing some work and occasionally trying to make some powerful work that can make an impact.
Johnny, you said, did I hear you say that do you feel safer in Russia than you did in Ukraine?
Well, absolutely, yes. I mean, it depends, what side you're on. Look, I mean, if you're a Ukrainian journalist who loves Zelensky, you're not going to be able to report from Donbass or the Russian side. They're not going to kill you, but they'll probably arrest you and deport you. And that's what happens in war. I mean, in war, there's two sides. So, if, like my position, it's very critical of the Ukrainian NATO position. So I can't report from Ukraine. If you're a journalist in Ukraine, Kyiv, and you start reporting that there's a lot of extremism in Ukraine, that Ukraine's going to lose the war, that Russia isn't really such a bad place and there should be peace, you're going to get, at the very least, arrested or deported. And the same on the Russian side. But I don't have a foaming the mouth hatred of Russia. Russia's a wonderful place, a nice country, and I'm critical of the NATO position because I believe that NATO has largely provoked this war, and I believe that there should be peace talks. And, so Russia allows me to report. I have to be careful what I report on this side as well. I mean, I'm not sitting on any big stories, but as a journalist reporting in conflict, I don't want to be arrested if I go back to the UK. I don't want to be killed by the Ukrainians, and I don't want to be arrested by the Russians. So you have to be very careful what you report. But yeah.
When you first got into Ukraine, you were in the war zone at times. Is that correct?
So in Kiev or?
Yeah. Well, wherever. Yeah. I mean, you were in where it was a militarized zone.
Well, in Kiev, when I was there, it was in April when the Russians were surrounding it. So you heard the bombs, the gunfire, the edge of the city, if you like. But I left there, then I went to Donbass. Donbass and Donetsk, it's a front line of the war zone, yeah. So, two of my apartments were hit. Two of my favorite cafes were hit once when I was inside. And the front lines on the edge of the city. So I spent a lot of time on the front lines with soldiers there, etc. So,
How
yeah, it's tough.
tough. When you were there, how surprising was it, or not surprising? What you saw, was it what you had anticipated?
Yeah, I mean, I started covering wars before, so every war is the same. It's just sort of different in its mise en scène, if you like. Um, a lot of horror, a lot of blood, a lot of dead, screaming people, and but essentially, many people understood how this war was going to go. That ultimately, if it carries on, Ukraine is going to run out of soldiers, Russia will going on. And
Wait,
so
when you say
that,
that, you said, I'm sorry, you said people understood where it was going, even at that point in time. You're saying?
yeah, I mean, if you remember when the war started, a lot of people around the world, outside the kind of Western mainstream media bubble, if you like, was using the phrase "to the last Ukrainian."
Right.
NATO is going to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, and that is what is happening. Unless Trump, I've become a Trump fan of all of this because I think Trump is the only guy, and I think he does want peace and he can create peace in Europe. It's hard. It's very hard for him to do that. He's the one trying to stop this war. And if he doesn't succeed, if the Europeans and Zelensky succeed, then it's just going to carry on. As Mark Rubio said, I think just today or yesterday, that what is Europe's strategy? Just to keep feeding money and weapons into Ukraine. When does it end? Ultimately, it will end Russia winning the war decisively. So, I hope Trump succeeds. But many people understood how this would play out ultimately. And that's what's happening. It's a war of attrition in which ultimately Russia, the country 5-6 times the size of Ukraine and the population, is going to win.
Right. Yeah, it's the with the meetings that they're having there. Since you were brought up, let's just play Rubio. We can quote him here.
It's been very clear from the beginning that President Trump views this as a protracted, stalemated conflict, and frankly, it's a proxy war between nuclear powers, the United States helping Ukraine and Russia. And it needs to come to an end. And no one has any idea or any plan to bring it to an end. The plan of the Ukrainians up to now and their allies on Capitol Hill and the people you talk to in other countries is, let's just keep giving them as much as they need for as long as it takes. That's not a strategy.
But that's what they rely upon. That's where their headset is at, and they've had that from the very beginning.
That's it, absolutely. And that was Biden's whole plan, and now it's the Europeans' plan. And Ukraine needs to be saved from itself. Not the Ukrainian people, by the way. Zelensky's very unpopular. So most Ukrainians want peace. I think most Ukrainians would give up this territory. One of the things the work that I've done most on, tried to push, which no one really seems to care about, is I've spent a long time, living in these Russian-controlled areas. Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson, if you want to include Crimea. What do these people want? Ukraine is a very multi-ethnic country. In the west of Ukraine, really hardcore Ukrainians. In the east and the south, they all speak Russian. Very Russian ethnic population. Crimea is vast majority Russian. Everybody understands that. In Donetsk, where the separatists have been controlled for the last 8 years, they're all extremely pro-Russian, extremely anti-Ukrainian, largely because of Ukrainian shelling. I've been to children's funerals, people killed, kids killed. The center of Donetsk, I've almost been killed numerous times. They can't be part of Ukraine anymore. And then these other areas that Russia has taken over since 2022, since the invasion or the special military operation, which everyone the Russians took over. Most of these areas are untouched by war. Just a few Russian soldiers patrolling the streets. That's about it. And these areas, it's many pro-Ukrainians are there, many pro-Russians are there. Most people just want peace. They have Slavic values. They all speak Russian. And it's, if Russia invaded America tomorrow, you'd be hard pushed to find anybody who said, oh, whatever, Russia government, American government. But in these areas, East Ukraine, they speak Russian. They just want peace, whether it's part of Russia or Ukraine. So that's my argument, the argument of many, that Ukraine is going to have to give up territory for peace. And for these territories, which most people living there just want peace, and they don't mind living in Russia, some of them really want to live in Russia, then there is a peaceful solution to be had.
And I want to get to that because I want to show our audience some of your work here. Hey, Johnny, do me a favor, because when you're leaning in, it's great. If you lean in. It's good when you're in. You're closer to the microphone. We can understand you better. If you lean back, it breaks up a little bit. So stay leaned in. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to show everybody. Here's another thing. This is what I fell in love with Johnny's work when I saw what he does on the ground. How dangerous is this, Johnny, what you're doing here? I guess in Crimea, there's no danger here, right? You talking to the citizens there?
In Crimea, I've done 3 years of work, so you've just been, I think you've just seen my work now. I mean, if you see some of my work on the front lines, that's damn dangerous. In Crimea before, I get hardcore death threats, phone hacking. I've had people following me. I've had hardcore stuff. So that's
you travel alone?
Yeah, basically, I haven't worked for anybody for over a year. I travel alone. I film myself. I edit myself. I often have a translator. My Russian's getting better, but I have a translator with me. But Crimea is very safe, very pleasant. Beautiful place, Crimea. I recommend it to anybody listening. When there's peace again, go to Crimea. Beautiful place. It's like it's Russia Riviera. And I do see it as part of Russia. But Crimea is a fantastic place.
Nice. Let's play some of your work for the audience so they can see what you've been doing.
As political repression descends.
Wrong tape. Here we go.
So Ukraine and NATO say that they want to take back Crimea from Russia. How do you feel about that?
I wish you good luck. Let's try. They can try, but they won't at all. It's a Russian place.
Can you explain why Crimea is Russian?
Historically.
Yeah. As a gift of Khrushchev. He's Ukrainian. He wanted to. I think he didn't care.
Yes.
Who Crimea is, yeah. So, what can I say more?
So we are Russians.
They sure seem like they. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Very cute young Russian couple there. Yeah.
And they feel the freedom to speak out like that, correct?
Yeah, I don't know what it's like in America. Probably similar in Britain. I've seen most people listening to this American. There's this absurd idea about Russia that I've been to a police state in the Middle East. I won't tell you which state. When people are actually scared to speak because they're worried about being overheard or they're worried that I might be silenced. Russia, you go to bars in Moscow. Many people are against Putin or against the war. People are they'll shout. No one's scared to speak. Russia's it's more authoritarian. There's more control of the press. It's more state-run, more control of politics. It feels just as free in the West. It's a very free, normal society. And so in Crimea, that the vast majority of people there support Russia. There are some pro-Ukrainians. And same in Russia. Russia's a much more unified country than America or Europe at the moment. In America, I think half the people love Trump, half the people hate Trump, roughly. In Russia, it's much more unified. There's certainly a lot of people who are disagreeing with the war and the rest of that. But of course, people go to Crimea. It feels exactly like I've traveled around America a bit. Wonderful country, America. It feels exactly the same as America, really.
So how much English is spoken there?
Not very much. Not all that much. The one reason I included that interview was just because they're very good at speaking English. more interesting interviews. But I could that was just a cute young Russian couple and speak very good English. But no, I mean, there's especially in Moscow, there's many people who speak English. Yeah, absolutely. But Donetsk, not very much at all. But different areas of Russia. But no, English is a global language. So many Russians speak English.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. And if anybody thinks that's just a generational thing as to their attitude and how they look at their homeland, Crimea, here's another generation speaking about Crimea.
Ukraine says they want to take back Crimea from Russia. How do you feel about that?
Украина говорит, что заберет Крым, вернет обратно к себе.
Да,
Что
конечно.
вы думаете по этому поводу?
Ага, сейчас.
Нет, такого, конечно, никогда не будет. Это они пусть помечтают.
Мы не
там сами.
отдадим Крым ни за, ни за что.
Ну,
Ни за что.
ну, ага, до этих 30 лет где Крым был? Ну, как бы Крым всегда был российским. Вот, поэтому здесь россияне в основном живут. Русские люди по духу.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that there are pro-Ukrainians there as well. I mean, you can tell people who don't want to speak on camera. They might get in a bit of trouble if they speak on camera. So it's not 100% kind of thing. But anyhow, there was an NBC American journalist who went there a while ago. Crimea is vastly pro-Russian. It's not even debated. So, and of course, a couple of those interviews, they were referring to Khrushchev. Many of your listeners don't know Khrushchev, of course, the Soviet leader who, in the USSR, effectively gave Crimea to Ukraine. And so many Crimeans are very unhappy with that. Why did you give Crimea to So I think even Elon Musk talked about that a while ago, that it was a historic mistake of the USSR giving Crimea to Ukraine. That's what they're referring to. But, so, do I have there's serious problems all around the world. Do I have an ethical problem about Russia taking Crimea? No, I don't. Ethically, I don't. Most people there want to be part of Russia. Same in Donetsk. In the other areas, a bit more complicated. The only way peace is going to happen is if Ukraine give up some territory.
Yeah, I agree with you. Johnny, are you an independent journalist? Is there anybody you're working for, or you're on your own?
I'm not working for anybody at the moment. I worked for Press TV, a Middle Eastern broadcaster, about 18 months ago. But at the moment, for the last year, I've literally been working for myself, going a bit crazy as well. Because of serious threats, serious phone hacking, serious threats, all the rest of it. Which is why I claimed asylum. So, but now at the moment, I'm not working for anybody now. I need to find work again, to be honest.
Wait, say it again. You need to what? I missed that. You need what?
I need to find work again, to be honest. Now I need to start finding work again. But it's, this is the problem. Especially in European media and American media, if you're promoting good relations between Russia and Europe, it's very hard to find work as a journalist. Such as the control of the press, and such as the warlike tendencies of Europe, and I think it's madness.
You're in a tough spot. I hear that. This next interview that you had was remarkable, and rather than comment on it beforehand, let me just play it, and then we'll talk on the other side of it.
Что ж это НАТО делает? Зачем им это? Мы их не трогали. Нам надо мир, нам надо работать, нам надо детей растить. Это ужасно, что происходит. А мы сидим в подвалах, без еды, без воды. Вот, пожалуйста. Нам нужен мир. Вы откуда вы? Кто вы?
Я из Донецка.
Не, а он кто?
Из Великобритании.
Из Великобритании. Негодяи. Что мирных людей убиваете, детей. У нас больше 200 вот за месяц погибло людей, не говоря уже о раненых. Детей погибло сколько.
So how about that? Well, it's not news to you, but to our audience, it might be. She sees NATO as the enemy, and she sees the Brits as scoundrels. Was that surprising to you when you heard that from her, Johnny?
I mean, I spent a long time there. So I mean, the worst was actually when I spent about a week covering the killing of children. So I did a story, a 6-year-old girl who was killed, and you go to the funeral, and lovely people interview the children, the sister and the mother at the gravesite, and they're very accommodating, and they want to get the story told. So a couple of days later, another kid was killed. So I went to the funeral, and we turned up late, and there's a reason that journalists are called vultures, because you're kind of feeding off the story, horrible stories of the dead. And so we weren't welcome. So I had to hang outside the entrance of the cemetery. And as the mourners came out, it's like another 6-year-old girl, like up in age, but about 6 years old. And as the mourners came out, they shouted at me, "You're British. You should be ashamed of yourself." So one of these moments as a journalist, you're just feeling awful. Because for people in Donbass, they are Russian ethnic people, and Ukraine and NATO, particularly Britain, France, and the United States, are supplying the weapons to Ukraine. They're killing their children. Yeah. So this year, and they're very lovely people. I have no problem there. When people get to know me, they're absolutely fine. And, it's a funeral, people take their hand, and that's like that woman there. That market had just been bombed that morning. So, so there's people there, that's their livelihoods, and the rest of it. So when she's very nice, by the way. We played the end of it. She's like, "Okay, thank you." But
right.
But of course, you hear. But I have to watch myself around Russian soldiers. If there's alcohol around, anything like that. My Russian's better now, so I can see around. But there is anger. But Russian people are so lovely. I know problem in Moscow. People are very American in Moscow. They're like, "Oh, it's American. It's fascinating, interesting." Let's not talk politics, but that's fascinating to me. Right. But yeah, because they blame NATO, Britain, America, France particularly, for paying for the weapons and sending the weapons that is killing, in some cases, their children. So, yeah.
And they, like you said, you had some pushback when you went to that funeral, but they must want their story told, right?
People are different in this is highly emotionally charged situations, like a child has just been killed. So people react to grief in different ways. So, this first funeral, I'm just there, by myself with my translator, and it's in a war zone. So there's no, notice boards or CNN news reports of where the funeral is going to be. You have to find them. It's big cities, big areas. So we find them, kind of stumble across it. Because I knew I had somebody being killed there. People getting killed all the time, but focus on the children. And so you turn up and you have to, and these people were really nice. And I went back to meet this family a year later. I also did a story about her teacher as well, really lovely high school, kindergarten teacher. Mm-hmm. But then this other funeral to go to, we also turned up a bit late at the gravesite. Not a great time, so we couldn't really explain ourselves. But also people react differently to it. Some people, I'm sure, some people, it's very personal. Some people, people react differently to grief, I think, and so you got to be careful as a, when you're journalists, you're dealing with people who are going through extreme grief. You get different reactions, but you also got to do your job. So, yeah.
No, you are, and you're doing a great one. I think a great job you're doing. Let's just to leave the civilians for a little bit. Let's just take a look at what's being said in the halls of power.
Speaking of these unreasonable accusations of Russia that we are preparing for war against Europe and France, President Putin has said many times that this is absolute nonsense. And I think that any reasonable person would understand that Russia doesn't want any war. Russia wants to eliminate the root causes of the situation created by the West in Ukraine in order to suppress the influence and essentially to wage war against Russia.
Unfortunately, Johnny, the narrative is to take him at his word. You're just being gullible. You're a fool, and he's to be outright rejected. Him, Putin, any words that come from the Russians. And isn't that exactly what's preventing peace? Is the stonewalling? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, look, the Russians are actually very clear about things. They've been very clear about their aims. They've been very, they say they want to look after their security interests. If you were political analysts 20 years ago, and there's people, former CIA people, I think even Joe Biden said it. You said 20 years ago, if we move NATO, we threaten to move NATO into Ukraine, you're going to start a war with Russia. You would simply be exhibiting the most basic understanding of international politics. But now, if you say it, you're some kind of Russian puppet. And that's the absurdity that's taken over the American liberal press, basically the entirety of the British and European press, liberal or otherwise, that you're some kind of Russian puppet if you say that NATO played a major role in provoking this war. It's simply, anybody with any understanding of international politics understands that. And we, essentially in 2014, we overthrew the Ukrainian government, put in place an ethno-nationalist government in Ukraine, which straight away persecuted the Russian population, particularly in the south and the east. Russia took over its interest in Crimea. It always had a major military base there. It's essential to their national interests. So they took Crimea as a the world of the chessboard, competing nation states. NATO effectively took Ukraine into its orbit. So Russia went, okay, we're taking Crimea. That's essential to us. In Donbass, people are so pro-Russian there that it was a indigenous uprising against Ukraine. Did the Russians help? Possibly. It's a conspiracy theory to say that they did. There's no evidence. They may have done. Certainly a lot of Russian nationalists came over to help people of Donbass. But the Donbass rose up, and then there was attempts to make peace for 8 years. They couldn't do it. And then the Russians invaded or started their special military operation. And they were clear about their aims. They wanted to basically neutralize Ukraine, make it into a neutral state, to denazify it, they say. I don't really agree with that. There's a lot of Nazis in Ukraine, by the way. Believe me, my translator in Donetsk is Jewish. She's a Donbass Russian patriot. She's Jewish. And I asked her one day, what do you think of all these Ukrainian soldiers running around with Nazi whatever? She said, yeah, we knew these people existed. We were shocked that European nations supported them. And it is shocking. But it is but I wouldn't necessarily call them Nazis, but they're Ukrainian nationalists, ultra-nationalists who hate the Russians. And that's what Russia wants to neutralize as well. Get rid of this hatred.
But
so
you think
they've been very clear about their aims.
I'm sorry, what was it at the end there? What'd you say?
They've been very clear about their aims. So when you say
for sure,
we should listen to what they say, no, actually listen to what they say. They have actually been very consistent and clear about what their aims are.
So when you heard it was I think June 14th, or it was in June this year when Putin stated very outrightly, specifically that denazification was critical happening. Was that you thought that was just a heavy-handed or overstated the situation?
No, I mean for Russians, what they mean by it is that there is an extreme ultranationalist state in Ukraine. Before 2014, you had a democratic state, deeply corrupt, but a democratic state in Ukraine, which basically every 4 years would the pro-Western government would win, then the pro-Russian government would win, putting it in simplistic terms. But it would just sort of go back and forth because Ukraine is a very ethnic, pro-Russian, pro-Ukraine, pro-Western. But what the West did in 2014 was basically put in power a pro-Western government, and that's why Crimea was taken. The East rose up, and one of the first things this new Ukrainian government did was persecute the Russian language. You can't persecute the Russian language when millions of your own people speak Russian. That's very important to them, particularly in the South and the East, and that's why the Civil War started. And so, what the Russians mean by denazify is by get rid of this government in Ukraine that hates Russia. And they use the word denazify. And there are a lot of Nazis. There are genuine lot of Nazis. But it's also the extremist anti-Russian feeling. That's what they mean by that. And I don't know whether they use that for propaganda purposes or whether that's how they see it. I mean, the Russians hate Nazis. Historically, it's very much what their modern history is built on. I mean, the Nazis killed 20 million Russians. So they are worried about that. Now you have Europe and Macron saying we need to pacify Russia. So every 100 years or so, the European, whether it's Napoleon or Hitler, seems to invade Russia. The Russians know their history, and we're not living at the end of history. We're living in the middle of history. And so Russians, you're damn right. Russians are worried about NATO putting their military bases right next to them. because their history shows that Europe tends to try and invade Russia every 100 years. And people in Biden and the Europeans just shrug and say, we don't care what the Russians think. Well, if you don't care what the Russians think, take the consequences. And the consequences are you're going to lose this war in Ukraine.
Yeah, to think that the Russians wouldn't react like that is preposterous.
Absolutely, you push them that far. And as I said 20 years ago, it'd be perfectly normal. And there is this George Kennan, former CIA people, FBI people, Biden, even from Chomsky, if you want to go on the left, the greatest minds. Have just basic understanding of international politics. If you push into Ukraine, the Russians will win. And that is what we are seeing. And now Trump is trying to realign American politics, understanding that the multipolar world has arrived, understanding that China is no longer rising, it is already risen, and he's trying to reset American foreign policy for the new era. But the Europeans are still stuck in the old world. The Europeans are still stuck. And this is what I'm so sad about. I'm a European most, I'm a British patriot, I'm a European patriot. And it makes me sick to think that Europeans are killing each other. I see Russians as Europeans. Moscow, St. Petersburg, they're European cities. They're two of the great European cities. It's European culture, essentially. And the Europeans are killing each other. And an American president is trying to stop it. And we Europeans keep wanting to kill each other. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny you should talk about being stuck in the old world. We played a clip on our earlier show today from Dr. Fiona Hill. She's been just an advisor for I think the Obama administration. I think Biden also. So here she's an advisor. And what you were saying about them being stuck, they are saying that in this case, she was referring to Trump wanting to go and speak with Putin, face to face, 1-to-1. He's stuck in the past. She likened it to, back in the 80s when Reagan wanted to talk or did talk to Gorbachev. She says too many things have changed since then. We can't possibly think that the old aim of sitting down with your nemesis is the right way to go about ending this war. So here she's accusing us. Fiona Hill is accusing us, people like you and I, that actually think sitting down and speaking is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing for Trump to want to sit down with Putin.
It's just absurd. I mean, I kind of understand that back in the Cold War days when you had, this ideological difference of capitalism versus communism. That I could understand, where you have these completely opposing ideologies. Putin is a capitalist. Russia is basically the same kind of capitalist society as the West, but it has a bit more of an authoritarian government. Just like in Europe, we stare aghast at America. I love America, but in America, you have complete freedom of your democratic system. That any rich person can fund political parties as much as they want, and you have such disparity between wealth and rich and poor. The Europeans are shocked by the level of homelessness in America. You have so much freedom, you love it. And by the way, most of my favorite writers are American. You create great writers, great artists, because you're free. In Europe, we look at America, you're so free, it's crazy, you're crazy. In Russia and Europeans are more socialist generally. We have better healthcare generally. We have, more constraints on our democratic system. In Russia, they take it a step further, and it is more authoritarian. But it's not some dictatorship or crazy, whatever. Russia is a capitalist country. It's probably a normal, civilized country. And that's why the person you're quoting is clearly just a nutcase. He has no understanding of international politics. He's either trying to sell some weapons or is just an idiot who's stuck in this old world.
Yeah, she is highly regarded in her circles for sure. She's they seek her out to hear what she has to think. Johnny, I love. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's so many nutcases in the world. So I've been a bit rude this morning. I'm not normally this rude. It's late at night, but
yeah. Listen, brother, I love your work. I want you to keep on. Don't you dare stop doing what you're doing, boy. It is so important. I just want to. That's why I wanted the audience to see your work and hear from you as to what's going on. And listen, let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much. Let's do that. I really enjoyed being on the show, guy. Yeah.
All right, brother. All right, we'll talk soon. Well, there you go, Johnny Miller. Follow him. Let's see. I got to remember what his handle is. There we go. At Johnny Mills on X, you can follow him there. He's got a lot of great stuff. You see, he goes all over the place, talking to the people on the ground, so you can hear from them, not from him, from them what's going on, and he delivers it. So make sure you follow him. All right. As always, Deep Dive. We are committed to being uncompromised. So please stay with us. We'll see you soon.